The sun hung low over the rolling hills of the Ozarks, casting long, golden shadows across the modest cabin where Jed Clampett sat on his porch, his old hound dog Duke resting near his boots. Life was simple, if not strenuous. Jed was a hard-working man, a mountaineer who spent his days trying to provide for his kin, often finding that the harvest was just enough to get by. It was a crisp morning, the kind that promised a little luck if one only knew where to look. With his trusty rifle in hand, Jed headed toward the thicket, hoping to bring home something for the evening meal. He moved quietly, his eyes scanning the terrain, until he spotted a patch of ground that seemed unsettled. He took aim and fired, but instead of the expected prey, the earth itself groaned and shuddered. From the depths of the soil, a thick, dark liquid bubbled up, coating the ground in a slick, viscous sheen. Jed blinked, leaning in close to inspect the anomaly. It was oil, that was what it was, raw and potent. Black gold, the locals whispered, or Texas tea as some called it. The discovery changed everything. Before the sun could set twice, Jed found himself a man of immense wealth, a millionaire in a world that had previously measured success by the weight of a sack of corn. The news traveled faster than a mountain breeze, and soon the kinfolk were gathering, their voices filled with excitement and advice. They told Jed that staying in the mountains was no longer fitting for a man of his stature. They insisted that California was the place to be, a land of opportunity where the sun always shone and the lifestyle was grand. Jed, ever the man to listen to those he loved, agreed. They loaded up the old truck, packing their meager belongings alongside their newfound dreams, and set a course for the Golden State. Their destination was Beverly Hills, a name that tasted like sugar on the tongue. It was a place defined by swimming pools and movie stars, a world away from the dusty trails of their home. As they drove, the scenery shifted from rolling hills to palm-lined boulevards, each mile bringing them closer to a life they had only ever imagined in their most hopeful daydreams. Upon arriving in their new mansion, the transition was not without its adjustments. Jethro, a lad of significant physical presence but simple sensibilities, was doing his best to adapt. He had been trying to teach Duke the art of fetching, a concept that seemed to baffle the hound entirely. Jethro stood in the courtyard, holding a stick aloft with a determined grin. "Go on, boy," Jethro commanded, his voice echoing against the stone walls. "Fetch," he repeated, carefully enunciating each letter as if the dog might respond better to a spelling lesson. Duke merely watched him with soulful, uninterested eyes. Jed leaned against the doorway, observing the spectacle with a faint, amused smile. It seemed to him that Jethro had been at this particular game for about 10 years, with little to show for it but a tired arm and a pile of sticks that Duke simply refused to acknowledge. "I reckon he is just too smart," Jethro sighed, dropping the stick. "Or perhaps just too stubborn," Jed countered. Duke was a bloodhound, bred for the intricacies of trailing a scent, not for the frivolous pursuit of wooden debris. He had no use for sticks, as he was no beaver, and he certainly had no desire to cater to human whims. Jethro, however, took it as a challenge of intellect, convinced that he and the dog were on the same level of the educational ladder. He reminded Jed that his own graduation from the 6th grade had been the result of 12 years of rigorous study, and he applied that same level of dedication to his canine companion. They were a pair, tethered by a mutual misunderstanding of the world around them, yet they were content in their own unique way. Inside the kitchen, Granny was busy preparing for guests. She was in her element, surrounded by pots and pans that had traveled a long way to find themselves in such a luxurious setting. She was putting together a meal that she hoped would teach a bit of country wisdom to the visitors, Lester and Errol, and Lester's wife, Gladys. The menu was ambitious: cow-cud casserole, followed by a steaming platter of tadpole turnovers. She added a medley of crackling bread, poke greens, minced maypops, goat tripe, and a roasted possum stuffed with chinkapin dressing. It was soul food in the truest sense, a labor of love intended to bridge the gap between their new life and their heritage. She wanted to show that even a woman from the hills could master the art of hospitality, and she hoped that Gladys, in particular, would take notice of the care put into every dish. As the morning progressed, the arrival of their visitors caused quite a stir. When a car pulled up the long, winding driveway, Jethro caught a glimpse of the occupants and immediately felt a surge of alarm. He saw people dressed in styles reminiscent of the outlaws Bonnie and Clyde, carrying props that looked far too real for comfort. The visitors were actually Lester, Errol, and Gladys, who had been busy with a photo shoot for their latest album and had not had the time to change out of their period costumes. The confusion led to a comical series of events, with Jethro rushing inside to sound the alarm, convinced that they were under siege by legendary bandits. Even Duke seemed to recognize the absurdity of it all, though he remained as stoic as ever. The tension dissipated quickly once the guests explained the reason for their attire, sharing a laugh that resonated through the grand halls of the mansion. The afternoon turned into a lesson in misunderstanding and merriment. Granny attempted to offer cooking advice to Gladys, who was wearing a vintage dress that she had borrowed for the shoot. The dress was nearly 40 years old, a fact that Jed found humorous, as he wondered why anyone would hold onto something for so long. The conversation veered into the topic of the bank, where Mr. Drysdale presided with an intensity that bordered on the theatrical. Jethro and the others, caught up in the spirit of their guests' costumes, decided to play a prank of their own. They gathered their own props and headed to the bank, intent on pulling a stunt that would surely surprise the ever-serious Mr. Drysdale. The scene at the bank was one of controlled chaos. Mr. Drysdale, upon hearing the alarm, immediately assumed the role of a valiant defender, ready to protect his vault at all costs. He barked orders to his staff, his voice booming through the teller windows and echoing in the halls. He was prepared to fight in the lobby, in the office, and even in the depths of the vault itself, convinced that his legacy of commerce was under attack. As the group arrived, the misunderstanding deepened. There was a moment of high drama where Jethro tried to sound menacing, only to be met by the sheer, unwavering dedication of Mr. Drysdale to his own importance. It was only when the laughter broke through the facade that the true nature of the prank was revealed. Mr. Drysdale, despite his initial indignation, eventually realized the value of the spectacle, seeing in it a potential for his own publicity. They decided to turn the experience into a grand commercial, a project that would unite them all in a common goal. They envisioned a tale of super bankers thwarting the notorious bandits of the past, a story that would cast them all in a new, exciting light. Granny was cast as Ma Barker, Jed as John Dillinger, and Jethro and Ellie as the infamous duo, Bonnie and Clyde. Flat and Scruggs provided the soundtrack, a rhythmic, driving melody that captured the spirit of the era. The rehearsals were filled with laughter and mishaps as they navigated the roles they had been given. They were a motley crew, united by the strangeness of their circumstances and the joy of their shared journey. The final filming was a sight to behold. They donned their costumes with pride, each person finding their own way to inhabit their character. Even Gladys, who had initially struggled with her part, found her rhythm, embracing the role of the siren who was meant to lure the unsuspecting outlaw to his fate. The bank became a stage, the desks turned into props, and the vaults became the centerpiece of their grand commercial. Mr. Drysdale, ever the strategist, saw the benefit of this endeavor for the Commerce Bank. He believed that the story would resonate with the people, showing them that the bank was a place of strength, virtue, and, above all, the protection of the intrepid superbanker. As the production wrapped, a sense of camaraderie settled over the group. They had started the day as strangers and acquaintances, but they ended it as a team that had weathered a storm of confusion and emerged with a story to tell. Jed looked at his family, the people who had traveled so far with him, and felt a profound sense of gratitude. They had moved from the hills of their ancestors to the mansions of the city, yet the core of who they were remained unchanged. They were still the same people who valued a home-cooked meal, the company of good friends, and the simple joys of a life well lived. The commercial was a success, capturing the hearts of the public with its blend of humor and nostalgia. It was a testament to the fact that, regardless of how much life might change or how grand one's circumstances might become, the spirit of family and the importance of staying true to one's roots remained the most valuable currency of all. They returned to their daily routines, the echoes of the filming still lingering in the air, but they did so with a renewed sense of purpose. They were the Beverly Hillbillies, a name that they carried not with a sense of irony, but with a sense of pride. They had shown that even in a world that often felt fast and demanding, there was always room for a bit of kindness, a good laugh, and the warmth of a story shared among those who mattered most. In the quiet of the evening, with the lights of the city twinkling like distant stars, Jed sat on his patio, watching the shadows stretch across the garden. He thought of his mountain home and the oil that had brought him here, but he realized that the true wealth was not the gold or the tea, but the memories they had forged together. He looked at Duke, who was finally dozing off, and smiled. Tomorrow would bring a new day, a new set of challenges, and new opportunities for humor and grace. They were part of a larger story now, one that was written in the hearts of those they touched, and the joy they spread in their own, inimitable way. And so, the story of Jed and his kin continued, a steady, rhythmic march toward the future, grounded in the timeless values of love, laughter, and the enduring strength of a family that walked together, no matter where the road might lead.